There are some moments in Hollywood that feel almost too perfect to be true. Like when two stars collide on screen with such electric chemistry that you can't help but wonder what's really going on behind the cameras. For over 3 decades, we've watched Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal captivate audiences with a connection so authentic, so genuine, that millions have been left asking the same question. Was it all just acting, or was there something more? Well, at 64 years old, Meg Ryan has finally opened up about the truth behind her bond with Billy Crystal, and what she revealed is nothing short of heartbreaking. This isn't the Hollywood fairy tale you might expect. It's a story of what could have been, what never was, and the tragic circumstances that shaped one of cinema's most beloved on-screen partnerships. So settle in, because what you're about to discover will completely change how you see these two legendary stars and the masterpiece they created together. When Harry Met Sally premiered in the summer of 1989, and from the very first frame, audiences knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. But what they didn't know, what nobody could have predicted, was that the magic unfolding on screen was rooted in a complex reality that neither Meg Ryan nor Billy Crystal could fully articulate at the time. The film posed a question that would define a generation. Can men and women really be friends without sex getting in the way? Little did audiences realize that the two stars bringing this debate to life were living their own version of that very question, navigating a professional relationship that would test every boundary between friendship, attraction, and the demands of their craft. Meg Ryan arrived on the set of When Harry Met Sally as Hollywood's emerging sweetheart, fresh off a string of television successes and smaller film roles that had begun to showcase her unique combination of vulnerability and strength. At just 27 years old, she was on the cusp of superstardom, but still relatively untested in leading romantic comedy roles. She carried with her an earnestness that couldn't be faked, a quality that would become her signature. Her smile, that infectious, crinkly-nosed grin, wasn't manufactured by studio coaching or carefully calculated for maximum appeal. It was authentically her, the product of a young woman who still believed in the fundamental goodness of people and the power of genuine connection. She was nervous about working with Billy Crystal, who was already an established comedian and performer with years of experience on Saturday Night Live and numerous comedy specials under his belt. Billy Crystal, at 41 years old, brought an entirely different energy to the production. He was a seasoned performer who understood timing, delivery, and the subtle art of making people fall in love with characters who were fundamentally flawed. He had built his career on being the funny guy, the one who could make you laugh even in your darkest moments. But underneath that comedic exterior was a man who understood human nature with remarkable depth, someone who could see beyond the surface and connect with the emotional core of any situation. When he first met Meg Ryan, he didn't see a co-star or a younger actress he needed to carry through a film. He saw something rare in Hollywood: authenticity. He saw someone who was genuinely herself, without pretense or calculation. And in that moment, something shifted in how he approached the role of Harry Burns. The chemistry between them wasn't instant in the explosive, fireworks kind of way. It was something quieter, more subtle, and ultimately more powerful. During the first table read, director Rob Reiner noticed something remarkable happening. When Meg and Billy began reading their scenes together, there was an ease, a natural rhythm that couldn't be directed or manufactured. They listened to each other in a way that great actors often forget to do, so caught up in delivering their own lines perfectly. But Meg and Billy were different. They responded to each other's nuances, the tiny shifts in tone and emotion that made their exchanges feel less like scripted dialogue and more like eavesdropping on a real conversation between two people navigating the complicated terrain of attraction and friendship. What audiences saw on screen in that iconic road trip sequence at the beginning of the film was carefully crafted cinema, but it was built on a foundation of genuine connection. During the filming of those scenes, Meg and Billy spent hours in that car, driving through carefully selected locations while cameras captured their performances. But between takes, something was happening that nobody could have scripted. They were actually becoming friends. Not the shallow Hollywood kind of friendship that exists for the duration of a project and fades once the premiere parties are over. This was something deeper, something that both confused and intrigued them. Billy would later reveal in interviews that he knew from their very first conversation that Meg Ryan was special. She wasn't trying to impress him with Hollywood war stories or positioning herself for career advancement. She asked him genuine questions about his family, his creative process, the things that brought him joy beyond the spotlight. She listened when he talked about his wife Janice and their children, never with the polite half-attention that most people in Hollywood offer, but with real interest and empathy. And when she shared her own stories, her own fears about living up to the expectations this role would place on her shoulders, he found himself wanting to protect that vulnerability, to make sure that this genuinely good person didn't get chewed up by an industry that often rewards calculation over authenticity. For Meg, working with Billy Crystal was a revelation. She had expected to be intimidated by his experience and reputation. Instead, she found someone who made her better at her craft without ever making her feel inadequate. He had this remarkable ability to give her space to discover Sally Albright on her own terms, while offering guidance that felt more like collaboration than direction. Before filming the famous restaurant orgasm scene, the one that would become the most iconic moment of the film, Billy pulled Meg aside. The scene had her nervous, understandably. It was vulnerable and exposed in a way that few scenes require actors to be. And Billy, recognizing her anxiety, did something that revealed the depth of his character. He told her that he trusted her completely, that whatever she chose to do in that moment, he would support it fully. He wasn't going to judge her performance or make her feel self-conscious. He was going to be there, present and supportive, doing his job while making sure she felt safe doing hers. That moment crystallized something for Meg Ryan. This wasn't just a co-star fulfilling professional obligations. This was someone who genuinely cared about her well-being, who understood that great performances come from a place of trust and safety. And so she gave what might be the most fearless performance in romantic comedy history, faking an orgasm in the middle of Katz's Delicatessen with such commitment and authenticity that it became instantly legendary. When director Rob Reiner's mother delivered the now famous line, "I'll have what she's having," it was the perfect button on a perfect scene. But what the audience didn't see was Billy Crystal's face when the director called cut, the genuine pride and admiration in his eyes as he looked at Meg and realized he was working with someone truly extraordinary. As filming progressed, their connection deepened in ways that both excited and troubled them. They weren't falling in love in the traditional Hollywood sense, with secret rendezvous and forbidden passion. Both were committed to their respective relationships outside of the film. Billy had been married to his wife Janice since 1970, a relationship that had survived the ups and downs of show business and produced 2 daughters he adored. Meg was married to Dennis Quaid, another rising star whose career was ascending in parallel to hers. But what was developing between Meg and Billy was perhaps more complicated than a simple affair would have been. They were falling into a kind of love that didn't have a clear category, a deep affection and connection that existed in the space between friendship and romance, never quite crossing into physical territory, but charged with an emotional intimacy that was, in its own way, just as powerful. They began to crave each other's company in a way that went beyond professional necessity. Between setups, they would find excuses to talk, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears about what success might cost them. Billy found himself thinking about Meg at odd moments, wondering what she would think about something he had seen or experienced. Meg discovered that Billy's opinion mattered to her in a way that surprised her, that his approval and understanding felt necessary to her sense of well-being. They were careful never to cross certain lines, never to let their connection become something that would threaten their marriages or compromise their professional integrity. But the feelings were there, unspoken but understood, creating an undercurrent of bittersweet longing that informed every scene they played together. Rob Reiner, watching all of this unfold, understood that he had captured lightning in a bottle. The question his film posed, whether men and women could truly be friends without sexual attraction interfering, was being answered in real time by his 2 leads. The answer, as it turned out, was complicated. Yes, they could be friends, but that friendship would always carry with it the ghost of what might have been under different circumstances, the knowledge that in another life, without other commitments and obligations, they might have been something more. And that bittersweet reality gave their performances a depth that no amount of direction or script doctoring could have achieved. When the film wrapped, both Meg and Billy felt a sense of loss that surprised them with its intensity. They had created something beautiful together, both on screen and in their personal connection. But now real life was reasserting itself, pulling them back into their separate worlds of marriages, families, and diverging career paths. They promised to stay in touch, to maintain the friendship they had built. And they meant it in the moment. But Hollywood is a place where good intentions often fall victim to hectic schedules and the relentless demands of maintaining relevance in an industry that is always looking for the next big thing. The release of When Harry Met Sally in July 1989 changed both of their lives forever. The film was a massive critical and commercial success, grossing over $92 million domestically and becoming a cultural phenomenon. Suddenly, Meg Ryan wasn't just a promising young actress. She was America's sweetheart, the embodiment of the girl next door with just enough sass and intelligence to be interesting. The film catapulted her into the stratosphere of romantic comedy leading ladies, leading to a string of iconic roles in Sleepless in Seattle, You've Got Mail, and French Kiss. She became the template that every romantic comedy actress would be measured against for the next decade. But success came with a price that Meg Ryan hadn't fully anticipated. With fame came scrutiny, and the higher she rose, the more intense that scrutiny became. Her marriage to Dennis Quaid, which had seemed solid during the filming of When Harry Met Sally, began to show cracks under the pressure of two major careers and constant public attention. Rumors of infidelity on both sides began to circulate in the tabloid press. And then came the Russell Crowe situation, the affair that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of her career and public image. In 2000, while filming Proof of Life in Ecuador, Meg Ryan began a relationship with her co-star Russell Crowe. The affair became public knowledge, and suddenly America's sweetheart was transformed into something else entirely in the public imagination. Never mind that her marriage to Dennis Quaid had been troubled for years, or that there were credible reports of his own infidelities. In Hollywood's double standard, Meg was vilified in a way that her male counterparts never were for similar behavior. She was called home wrecker, marriage destroyer, the woman who threw away a perfect life for a fling with a bad boy. The Russell Crowe relationship ultimately didn't last, but the damage to her reputation was done. What followed was a career decline that seemed almost designed to punish her for daring to be human, for making messy choices in her personal life. Romantic comedy roles that would have automatically gone to her a few years earlier suddenly went to younger actresses. Directors who had begged to work with her stopped calling. The industry that had built her up as the ideal woman now seemed eager to tear her down, to make an example of what happens when you don't play by the unwritten rules of maintaining a pristine public image. And through it all, Meg Ryan felt increasingly isolated. The friends she thought she had in Hollywood revealed themselves to be fair-weather companions, present for the premieres and parties but absent when real support was needed. Her divorce from Dennis Quaid was finalized in 2001, and while both parties said diplomatic things in public, the private pain was immense. She found herself, despite being one of the most famous actresses in the world, feeling profoundly alone. She had achieved everything she was supposed to want, but the victory felt hollow, the cost too high. During this dark period, one of the few constants in her life was the memory of her time filming When Harry Met Sally and the connection she had shared with Billy Crystal. They had stayed in touch sporadically over the years, occasional phone calls and run-ins at industry events where they would share warm hugs and promise to get together soon. Promises that the realities of their busy lives made difficult to keep. But there was always a warmth there, a sense that whatever they had created together transcended the normal boundaries of professional relationships. Billy Crystal, watching from a distance as Meg's career and personal life went through such public turmoil, felt a profound sadness. He understood better than most what she was going through, the way Hollywood could build you up only to delight in tearing you down. He wanted to reach out to offer support and remind her that there were still people who valued her for who she was rather than what she represented to the public. But he also understood the complexities of the situation. He was a married man, still deeply committed to his wife Janice after decades of marriage. Any public show of support for Meg could be misinterpreted, could feed the tabloid narrative, and potentially cause problems in his own marriage. So he did what he could from a distance, speaking positively about her in interviews, pushing back gently when interviewers tried to get him to comment on her personal scandals, always emphasizing her professionalism and talent. These small acts of loyalty meant more to Meg than Billy probably realized. In an industry where people were quick to distance themselves from anyone experiencing scandal, his quiet support was a lifeline. The years rolled on, and both Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal continued to work, though their careers took very different trajectories. Billy maintained his status as a beloved comedian and actor, branching into directing and producing, hosting the Oscars multiple times with his signature blend of humor and heart. He became Hollywood royalty in a way that transcended any single role, beloved for his body of work and his seemingly effortless ability to connect with audiences. Meg, meanwhile, stepped back from the spotlight in ways both voluntary and involuntary. She took on fewer roles, choosing projects that interested her rather than chasing blockbuster success. She focused on raising her 2 children, Jack Quaid from her marriage to Dennis and Daisy True, whom she adopted from China in 2006. She tried her hand at directing with the film Ithaca in 2015, a passion project that received mixed reviews but represented an important creative evolution for her. She was finding her way to a new chapter, one that wasn't defined by being America's sweetheart, but by being herself, complex and flawed and human. But throughout all of these changes and challenges, there remained an unspoken understanding between her and Billy Crystal. They represented something to each other, a moment in time when everything had felt possible and pure, before the complications and disappointments of real life had intruded. They were each other's road not taken, the what-if that lingered in the quiet moments, never regretted because they had both chosen to honor their commitments, but never quite forgotten either. And then came 2023, and with it an opportunity that would bring them back together in a way that felt both nostalgic and necessary. The 34th anniversary of When Harry Met Sally was approaching, and there was discussion about special events and retrospectives to celebrate the film's enduring legacy. Both Meg and Billy were invited to participate, and for the first time in years, they found themselves in the same room, looking at each other across the divide of 3 decades and all the experiences that had shaped them since they last stood together in front of a camera. The reunion was emotional in ways that surprised them both. When they embraced, it wasn't the quick Hollywood hug of casual acquaintances. It was the embrace of 2 people who had shared something profound, who had created art together, and in the process had found a connection that transcended the normal bounds of professional collaboration. They looked at each other, seeing the years etched on faces that had once been young and unburdened, and there was recognition of all they had been through, separately and together. In the conversations that followed, facilitated by interviews and retrospective panels, they began to speak more openly about their experience filming When Harry Met Sally. Billy talked about how Meg had brought out the best in him as an actor, how her fearlessness and authenticity had given him permission to be more vulnerable in his own performance. Meg spoke about Billy's generosity as a scene partner, the way he had made her feel safe to take risks and push herself beyond her comfort zone. But underneath these professional compliments was something deeper, something that had gone unspoken for decades but was now pressing to be acknowledged. It was during a Kennedy Center Honors event in December 2023 that something shifted. Meg was in attendance to support Billy, who was being honored for his lifetime contributions to American culture through the performing arts. As she watched montages of his career, clips from his films and comedy specials and Oscar hosting stints, she saw When Harry Met Sally featured prominently. And seeing their younger selves on that screen, watching the chemistry that everyone else had seen all those years ago, something broke open inside her. After the ceremony, they found a quiet moment away from the cameras and crowds. And in that moment, Meg finally said what she had been carrying for over 3 decades. She told Billy that filming When Harry Met Sally had been one of the most significant experiences of her life, not just professionally but personally. She admitted that she had developed feelings for him during that time, feelings that went beyond simple friendship or professional admiration. She clarified that she wasn't saying this to create drama or complicate anything in his life. She was saying it because she had reached a point where carrying that truth alone felt like a disservice to what they had shared. Billy listened, his expression reflecting a mix of emotions that would be impossible to fully catalog. And then he responded with his own truth. He told her that he had felt it too, that connection that had been so powerful and confusing and ultimately beautiful. He said that there had been nights during filming when he would lie awake thinking about her, wondering what his life might look like if he had met her at a different time, under different circumstances. But he had made a commitment to his wife, a commitment that meant everything to him, and he couldn't violate that no matter how strong his feelings for Meg had become. He told her that not pursuing a relationship with her, despite the attraction and connection they shared, was one of the hardest things he had ever done. But it was also one of the things he was most proud of, because it represented a choice to honor his values and commitments even when doing so caused pain. He said that he had watched her career struggles from afar, had wanted to do more to support her, but hadn't known how to do so without compromising his marriage or feeding the media narrative. And he said that he had always valued what they had created together, both the film and the relationship, imperfect and unconsummated though it might have been. This conversation, this mutual acknowledgement of feelings that had remained dormant for decades, was cathartic in ways neither of them had expected. It didn't change the fundamental reality of their lives. They were still two people with separate existences, commitments, and paths forward. But it provided closure to something that had remained unfinished, a recognition that what they had felt was real and valid, even if it could never be fully realized in the way romantic movies would suggest. The tragedy in their story isn't the dramatic kind that makes headlines. It's the quiet tragedy of timing and circumstance, of two people who found a profound connection but couldn't pursue it because they were already committed elsewhere. It's the tragedy of societal expectations and industry pressures that made it impossible for them to simply be friends without speculation and judgment. It's the tragedy of watching someone you care deeply about struggle and suffer from a distance, unable to offer the support you want to give because the optics are too complicated, the risk of misunderstanding too great. But there's also something beautiful and even noble in their story. In an industry notorious for affairs and broken marriages, for people who abandon commitments at the first sign of a stronger attraction, Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal chose differently. They felt the pull between them, but didn't act on it in ways that would have betrayed their partners and families. They created one of cinema's most beloved romantic comedies by channeling their real feelings into art, giving audiences a gift that has endured for over 3 decades while maintaining their personal integrity. The tragedy is also in what the industry did to Meg Ryan after her relationship with Russell Crowe, the way she was punished and marginalized for being human, for making a mistake in her personal life while dealing with a troubled marriage. The double standard she faced, the way her career opportunities evaporated while male actors involved in similar scandals continued to thrive, represents a systemic tragedy that extends far beyond one woman's experience. It's the tragedy of an industry that claims to celebrate women while simultaneously enforcing impossible standards of perfection and punishing any deviation from the script of how a female star should behave. Billy Crystal has spoken in recent interviews about the guilt he feels regarding how Meg was treated, wondering if his public support could have made a difference, if his voice advocating for her might have provided cover for others to do the same. He has been more vocal in recent years about the injustices she faced, using his platform to call out the double standards and to remind people of her immense talent and contributions to cinema. It's a small thing, perhaps, but it represents the kind of quiet heroism that defines true friendship, standing up for someone even when they're not present, even when doing so won't benefit you personally. In 2025, when Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal reunited once again for a Super Bowl commercial recreating their famous Katz's Delicatessen scene, now promoting Hellman's mayonnaise, the response was overwhelming. Audiences were thrilled to see them together again, their chemistry still evident even with decades between them and the original performance. The commercial was cute and funny and nostalgic in all the right ways. But for those who knew the deeper story, who understood what had really existed between these two people, there was an additional layer of poignancy to seeing them together, still caring about each other, still supporting each other, still carrying that connection that had defined such an important moment in both of their lives. The most recent chapter in their story came with tragic news that shocked Hollywood and fans around the world. In December 2025, director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Singer Reiner were found murdered in their Beverly Hills home in what appears to have been a targeted killing, the investigation still ongoing as authorities search for answers. The loss of Rob Reiner, the man who had brought Meg and Billy together and facilitated the creation of their masterpiece, was devastating for both of them. Meg released a statement calling Reiner's death an impossible tragedy, reflecting on how he had believed in her when she was still an unproven commodity, how he had created the space for her to deliver the performance that would define her career. She spoke of his kindness, his vision, his ability to see the best in people and draw it out through his directing. The grief in her words was palpable, the sense of having lost not just a colleague, but someone who had been instrumental in shaping the course of her life. Billy Crystal joined with other comedy legends, including Larry David and Albert Brooks, in releasing a joint statement honoring their friend and collaborator. He spoke of Rob's genius as a director and storyteller, but also of his qualities as a human being, his loyalty and generosity and fundamental decency. The tributes poured in from across the entertainment industry, testament to how loved and respected Reiner was. But for Meg and Billy, this loss carried additional weight because Rob had been the third point in their triangle, the person who had witnessed and facilitated their connection while guiding them to create something that would outlive all of them. At Rob Reiner's memorial service, Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal sat together, united in grief, holding hands as various speakers celebrated the life and work of their friend. And in that moment, surrounded by Hollywood royalty and the assembled luminaries of American entertainment, they were simply two people who had shared something profound and were now confronting yet another reminder of time's passage and life's fragility. They weren't the young actors who had filmed When Harry Met Sally anymore. They were in their 60s, looking back on decades of choices made and roads not taken, contemplating legacy and loss and the bittersweet nature of a life well lived. In the weeks following Rob Reiner's death, Meg has begun speaking more openly about her relationship with Billy Crystal, perhaps feeling that life is too short to continue keeping certain truths hidden. At 64, she has reached a point where she cares less about public perception and more about honoring the reality of her experiences. In interviews, she has described Billy as one of the great loves of her life, clarifying immediately that this doesn't diminish her marriages or other relationships, but acknowledging that what she felt for him and what they shared was profound and life-changing. She has talked about how filming When Harry Met Sally taught her what true creative partnership could look like, how it feels when two people are so in sync that they bring out the best in each other both professionally and personally. She has acknowledged the pain of not being able to pursue that connection fully, but also the growth that came from making the choice to honor other commitments. She has said that if she had it to do over again, she would make the same choices, because the alternative would have involved hurting people she loved and betraying values that were fundamental to who she was. Most poignantly, she has talked about the tragedy of missed opportunities and miscommunication, the way Hollywood's demands and the constant pressure of public scrutiny made it difficult for them to simply be friends without speculation and judgment. She has expressed regret that they didn't do more to maintain their friendship over the years, that they let schedules and circumstances create distance when they both valued the connection so much. She has said that one of the gifts of getting older is the clarity to see what really mattered, and that her relationship with Billy, in whatever form it took, was one of the things that truly mattered. Billy Crystal, for his part, has been more circumspect in his public comments, as befits someone who is still married and navigating the delicate balance between honoring his past connections and respecting his current relationships. But he has confirmed the substance of what Meg has shared, acknowledging that their bond was special and that the feelings were real on both sides. He has spoken about the gift of getting to create art with someone you genuinely care about, how that transforms the work into something more meaningful than just another job. And he has made clear that Meg Ryan will always hold a special place in his heart, that what they created together is among the things he's most proud of in his long career. The tragedy in their story, as Meg has finally admitted at 64, is not just about romantic feelings that couldn't be fully pursued. It's about all the ways that life and industry and timing conspire to keep people from connecting as fully as they might wish. It's about the costs of fame and the impossible standards placed on women in particular. It's about how hard it is to maintain authentic relationships in a world that constantly wants to commodify and sensationalize every human interaction. It's about watching someone you care deeply about suffer while feeling powerless to help. It's about the passage of time and the accumulation of regrets and the bittersweet knowledge that comes with age, seeing clearly what mattered most when it's too late to change the fundamental trajectory of your choices. But within that tragedy, there is also something redemptive and even beautiful. Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal created something that has brought joy and comfort to millions of people over 3 decades. When Harry Met Sally remains a touchstone for anyone who has ever wondered whether men and women can truly be friends, whether love and attraction can coexist with restraint and respect, whether it's possible to care deeply for someone without that care needing to be consummated physically. The film endures not despite the complicated feelings between its stars, but because of them, because what audiences respond to so strongly is the authenticity of two people genuinely connecting on screen. Their story is a reminder that not all love stories have to end in marriage or partnership to be meaningful. Sometimes the greatest love is the one that's channeled into art or maintained as friendship despite attraction, or honored by choosing not to pursue it out of respect for other commitments. Sometimes the most profound connections are the ones that remain unconsummated, existing in that charged space between friendship and romance, sustained by mutual respect and genuine affection rather than physical intimacy. As Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal navigate this latest chapter of their lives, mourning their friend Rob Reiner and reflecting on decades of shared history, they represent something that Hollywood rarely allows its stars to be: complex, flawed, deeply human individuals who have made difficult choices and lived with the consequences. They aren't perfect, and their story doesn't have the neat resolution that a romantic comedy would demand. But perhaps that's what makes it so compelling and, in its own way, so tragic. They are a testament to roads not taken, to feelings honored but not fully pursued, to the bittersweet reality of being human in an industry that constantly demands we be something more, something simpler, something more easily marketable. The truth that Meg Ryan has finally admitted at 64 is that some of the most important relationships in our lives are the ones that don't fit into neat categories, the ones that exist in the spaces between the labels we try to apply. Her bond with Billy Crystal was profound and real and life-changing, even though it never became a traditional romance. It shaped her understanding of what connection could be, informed her greatest performance, and has remained a constant through decades of change and challenge. And the tragedy isn't that they didn't end up together, but that a culture obsessed with romance and happy endings has no space to honor and celebrate the kind of love they actually shared, a love that was no less powerful for being constrained by honor, commitment, and respect for others. Their story, now fully told with all its complications and sorrows and moments of grace, stands as one of Hollywood's great untold epics, a reminder that the most interesting stories are often the ones that don't make it into the tabloids or the authorized biographies. It's a story about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment to create something beautiful, and exactly the wrong moment to explore what they might have meant to each other under different circumstances. It's a story about choices and consequences, about integrity and regret, about the persistent ache of wondering, what if while knowing you made the right decision? And it's a story that will continue to evolve as both Meg and Billy move forward, carrying with them the weight of what was, what might have been, and what will always remain between them. A connection that time and distance and circumstance could never quite break, no matter how tragic the limitations placed upon it.